Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cellcast presents Untangling Kingdom Hearts, a retrospective of the Kingdom Hearts franchise, one little bit at a time. Today we are on Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, and we are looking at the cutscene, a shooting star, a Gummi Ship in ruins, and Not Quite Right. All three of these are under the Daybreak Town Moogle menu, which if you don't know what a Moogle is, I'll be explaining it here in just a second. But basically, it's the other one that's got the Daybreak Town picture on it, but doesn't have the gray cat. It actually has kind of a white bear thing with a red palm on its head. But yeah, I'll get to that here in just a minute. So why don't we just go ahead and get started? From what I can tell after the last cutscene, where Key Player got the power bangle, he then had a couple of missions in the game where he just had to kill stuff, a little bit of grinding. In video game terminology, when we say grinding, what we are referring to is continually just doing whatever you have to do to get your experience levels up, get a little bit stronger, get to higher levels, that sort of thing, depending on what we're doing. In this case, Key Player probably went around killing a bunch of Heartless, and then after a while he was able to unlock this next cutscene, Shooting Star, which begins with, I would say Daybreak on Daybreak Town, except it always looks like it's Daybreak in Daybreak Town. So the camera kind of shifts, and we see a shooting star flash across the sky. And we're told that down by the waterfront, a shooting star landed. We should go check it out. And that's what Key Player does. So the fact that we are seeing a shooting star is kind of relevant, as shooting stars will come up much later. Generally, it heralds the coming of people who aren't from that world. But based on my understanding, that shouldn't necessarily be an issue here, but there's a lot of other things that, based on my understanding that we're about to see, shouldn't be happening either, but we will see how that goes here in just a second. As Key Player comes on the scene, he sees a strange-looking block on the ground, and as he goes to investigate it, a Moogle comes up and takes it from him. Moogles are a race of creatures that come from the Final Fantasy franchise. More specifically, created for Final Fantasy III. They would appear in many Final Fantasies after this point, and are in Kingdom Hearts primarily because of the initial Final Fantasy connection. They will continue showing up in Kingdom Hearts games, and in some cases are the only connection to the Final Fantasy franchise remaining in some of these games, which we'll talk more about that when we get to those games, but I'll just say one of the things I do get annoyed about with the franchise is this. Usually, the Moogles are generally the only Final Fantasy things in it. I get that the Kingdom Hearts franchise is not intended by its creator as a crossover between Disney and Final Fantasy, but the thing is, the Final Fantasy is kind of part of its DNA, but we will get more to that later. For now, let's continue. One of the odd things about Moogles is that they always interject into their speech the word Kupo. They all do it. And what Kupo means, I could not tell you. I've looked it up. As near as I can tell, this is mostly meant to be kind of a filler word. It's also kind of an onomatopoeia, like saying meow for a cat, or nyan if you're Japanese for a cat, for what cats say. This is essentially supposed to be the equivalent because these are creatures. They just happen to also speak a language we can understand. So you will hear the term Kupo quite a lot in the speech throughout the games. But what we're also seeing in this scene is this might be the first instance, chronologically, of Moogles deciding they're going to make money off of us. Now, I have not mentioned the currency up to this point, as it's not been necessary to know, but the currency for the Kingdom Hearts games is money. Spelt M-U-N-N-Y. So, yeah, you get a lot of times when you defeat Heartless throughout the series, you, along with collecting little health orbs, you'll also collect these gold money orbs. And you can spend that money for different things. You can have 2 money, 15 money, 20 money, 100 money. That's the way the wording goes. Yes, it's awkward in English, but that's just what they went with, and that's what we're going with. And the Moogles tend to be the shopkeepers that we end up exchanging this money with in order to get items and goods and services. That's not always true, as there are some instances later on many instances later on actually, where we will actually spend money with different merchants. But a lot of times, most of the time, Moogles serve the role of shopkeeper within the Kingdom Hearts games. But this is the first time chronologically we're seeing a Moogle actually mention money, and yeah, it's already quite interesting. The Moogle goes ahead and picks up a couple more of these gummy block shapes that are scattered all around this little courtyard that we've walked into, and runs off screen, and we hear 2 people talking off screen, and they are 2 characters I was not expecting to see yet because of how I understood how the timeline worked, but I'll explain in a second. The key player walks across the courtyard, and we see that the 2 people who are talking off screen are, in fact, Donald Duck and Goofy. And this throws me for one heck of a loop, because I am not expecting these 2 characters to be showing up here, because to my knowledge, this is supposed to be taking place during the Age of Fairy Tales, as it's described. At the beginning of the game, if you remember from when I had to tell you what we missed back during the end of the Wonderland segment, at first Wonderland episode, this whole thing is being told as a story by a grandmother to her granddaughter. Now, I did not say who that granddaughter was, and I'm still not going to tell you, other than it is a major character from the franchise. It's somebody we recognize. And we have actually seen the grandmother before, too, as they appeared in a cutscene in the original Kingdom Hearts, which we'll get to, much later on. But the fact that these 2 characters are telling this story, or this grandmother's telling the story to her granddaughter, and then these 2 characters are showing up in the story almost like they are the same age as our characters later on, and the same age here, as in, because either Donald Duck and Goofy are immortal and will forget things, or there is a reset that happens somewhere after this, or time travel has to be involved, because we also know later on there are some events that occur, I assume occur between the Age of Fairy Tales and Kingdom Hearts 2, I'll say. Really, Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, which is the next game chronologically after this, that should technically not have this work. But like I said, I am confused. We will see how this comes. But anyway, let's continue. So it appears Donald and Goofy have crash landed in this courtyard. They were the shooting star that we saw in the sky. And they recognize the fact that we have a Keyblade and then some Heartless attack. The key player defeats the Heartless, and we then start the next cutscene, which is a Gummi Ship in ruins. It should be noted that the Heartless key player fought was called a Red Gummi Copter, and upon defeating it, Goofy finds that it dropped a gummy block. Apparently, Goofy had a gummy radar that, upon the defeat of that Gummi Heartless, it retrieved the gummy block it was carrying, and he says he couldn't do it without us. Donald then asks a question he was trying to get to earlier and asks us why we have a Keyblade. The character kind of gives a little shrug, and It fades to black as obviously we are skipping the part where we are telling Donald and Goofy why we have a Keyblade. Basically, the story so far. Donald is utterly confused by everything we say because he says he's never heard of any of this stuff before, and Goofy, in the kind of wisdom that only Goofy can give, states the obvious that, well, it's because we've never been here before, we don't know what's going on here, so probably we'll learn more as we go on. And then Goofy asks, if we can help, because, they don't really have a good way of getting the gummy blocks, which Donald kind of forgot. And tries to berate Goofy, saying, hey, we don't need his help. And Goofy says, but we don't have anything to fight these Heartless with. He goes, oh, yeah. Would you go help us and go, get us some more gummy blocks? We agree to help Goofy and Donald, and Goofy gives us the gummy radar so we can actually, bring the gummy blocks back to them after we defeat the Heartless. And they say they're going to hang out there and start rebuilding their Gummi Ship while they're waiting on us with what parts they have. At this point, we enter. Key player goes around and knocks a bunch of Heartless out until eventually, we get the message saying that we've got all the gummy blocks. Head back to Donald and Goofy, and then the next cutscene begins, which is called "Not Quite Right." As we enter the scene, the song "Gearing Up," which is the Gummi Ship Garage music from Kingdom Hearts 2 plays, which is an interesting choice there since we are dealing with Gummi Ships. And Goofy is just happy that we have brought them the pieces, and so is Donald. So they go and start trying to rebuild their Gummi Ship. The screen fades to black so they don't have to animate actually trying to rebuild this thing. And it becomes apparent as we fade back in from black, that Donald and Goofy really should have had some blueprints on hand, because they did not build a gummy spaceship, which is what they're supposed to be building. They built a gummy car, which vrooms as the scene goes on. They say perhaps we don't have all the pieces we need, and ask Key Player to go find some more while they try and fix things. As the screen fades to black, a message pops up saying, there are no more Gummi Heartless on this world, so we should go look at other worlds to find them. And that's where we will come back next time. I am understandably confused myself as to why Donald and Goofy are here, because to my knowledge, they're not supposed to be here. But one hopes that's going to be explained. To some degree, I think maybe this is time travel. Maybe it's not. I'm not sure. But, remember, this first one, I'm coming at nearly completely blind because this is the one game I didn't know anything about. So, honestly, Goofy and Donald being here are actually kind of confusing me. I know we've got some other little weird issues, like the fact that the Snow White world is going through its movie plot, despite the fact I know later on it goes through its movie plot in another game. So there is some confusion on my part. Maybe we'll see how that fits together. Other than that, the part with Goofy and Donald trying to rebuild the Gummi Ship, and all they come up with is a old-timey looking gummy car, I think is absolutely hilarious. I appreciate some stuff like this, and so now that we're finally getting out of what I would think is the tutorial section, and I don't know if the story has started yet, to be honest, but some of the wit that I'm aware of this series having is finally showing up in here. So I'm curious to see where we go next. Join us next time as we will be doing the cutscenes Sleepy and Grumpy, which are going to be in the Dwarf Woodlands. Then we will come back to Daybreak Town Moogle and look at Mickey, Chip, and Dale and missing parts. So join me back for that. The Cellcast is a member of the Pop Americana and Culture Box media networks. For more information about shows in those networks, please check the links in the description. The Cellcast presents Untangling Kingdom Hearts as a production of the Cellcast podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at cast_cell, on Facebook at the Cellcast, on Twitch at the Cellcast Gaming, And you can email us at thecellcastpodcast@gmail.com or visit us on our webpage at thecellcast.podbean.com. Our theme music is Trinity by Tyler Spirian and is a remix of the song Dearly Beloved by Yoko Shimomura from the franchise Kingdom Hearts. The Cellcast podcast has no affiliation with Square Enix, Disney, or for that matter anyone else connected to the Kingdom Hearts franchise. The Cellcast Presents Untangling Kingdom Hearts is a fan production and no copyright infringement is intended or implied. Kingdom Hearts is owned by both Disney and Square Enix. This podcast also is not intended to be a replacement for playing the games. Please go and play them yourself.